Hello and welcome back for your Lab 6 instructional video. So this lab in particular takes us through minerals, rocks, and fossils very lightheartedly because obviously we're looking at a computer screen and using those references, let alone actually using the material in your hand. Well, let's begin with the foundation, being minerals. Minerals are defined as a naturally occurring inorganic solid with a definite chemical composition and regular internal crystalline structure. The key to the definition is that the chemical composition and the crystalline structure, different chemical compositions result in different minerals. So as an example, diamond and graphite, both minerals are composed of carbon. The same chemical composition, but two different crystalline structures. Therefore, they're two different minerals. So what we're going to learn is how to identify the foundations of minerals, and then from there, we're going to graduate into identifying rocks. I often compare identifying minerals to like identifying powdered cookie dust. You know, like maybe you have an Oreo cookie or a chocolate chip cookie, and someone crumbles it up into a small Ziploc bag. Could you depict the elements that were made or there that would make that part to whole? So there's different attributes that we can use. We can use color, luster, hardness, cleavage, or fracture, or streak as all properties and how we identify that. So that's often how I do this in class: is have like a Ziploc bag, crumble up an Oreo cookie. We look at the ingredients as being elements, and then from there we can break it across and go, okay, well, if these are the elements that are part of this, and therefore this mineral must be that. We do the same thing with rocks and the same ideas you'll see later. So a couple things I want to point out as you work through this lab is one is that out of the physical properties that we use, the most useless is color because there's lots of minerals that are green, and just because it's green it doesn't mean it's like this. So I often compare color to like as in people. It's like just because it looks a particular way doesn't mean that that's what it will be. And so we do use it at the end as just an observed trait, but it doesn't really, it's not the end all. It's not that doesn't just define it as what it is. The next property would be luster, which is a lot more important. Luster describes how light is absorbed or reflected by the surface. So it can be glassy, waxy, resinous, dull, or even earthy or dirty looking. All minerals will have a type of luster. The next thing that we can look at will be the hardness. How hard is the specimen? We use the Mohs hardness scale, 1 being talc, 10 being diamond. This spectrum allows us to understand the differences between two samples. So what we'll do is we'll actually have a hardness scale in hand. And let's say we have an unknown and I take my number 5, which happens to be apatite, and I scratch my unknown. Well, if the 5 scratches the unknown, then the 5 is harder. So then I'd move down to number 4, take the 4 and scratch my unknown specimen. And if they scratch each other, then they are of equal hardness. To kind of put the spectrum in scale, a 2.5 thereabouts is the hardness of a fingernail. So anything below that you should be able to scratch with your own fingernail. The next property will be cleavage and fracture. So either the specimen will cleave or it will fracture. So what does that mean? Well, cleavage means that it just breaks into a particular shape or design. Fracture means it actually just breaks like glass. So since cleavage is caused by a certain arrangement of weak bonds in a particular crystalline structure, it can be used as a very good characteristic for certain minerals. So as an example, something that has very distinct cleavage will be calcite, which is rhombohedral. It's a square at an angle. Versus, they're using obsidian as an example. This is fracture, a very nice conchoidal fracturing. But nonetheless, this is, well, we'll work into that as we progress through the lab. Looking at lab 3, here's examples of cleavage. So muscovite mica has one plane. What does that mean when we use the phrase plane? It means sets of sides. So if it has two sides, like a top and a bottom, then it has one direction. If it has, as an example, 2 directions, then it must have 4 sides. Or if it has 3 directions, it must have 6 sides. So look at that square. You can count there are 6 sides to a square, which means it has 3 planes of cleavage. Nonetheless, we can move forward in looking at a mineral streak. Streak in particular means that some minerals, although a particular color, when struck upon a white plate, will leave a different color. Well, the differences of those colors is actually helpful. So here we have your list of minerals for mineral identification. This is just a very rough list. I have it ordered by the hardness, its particular hardness, the color, the streak, whether it's cleavage or fracture, and if it's a cleavage, what does it make, some miscellaneous property in the mineral name. Well, using that and this online tool, you'll use this link that will have you learn how to identify all 9 of these specimens. You will then write your answers here. Once done, you'll begin with the rock cycle. You'll learn about the rock cycle of igneous, sedimentary, and metamorphic. I'll scroll up here. There's no start or finish within the cycle. We can see that igneous rocks can be metamorphosed. Igneous rocks can also be weathered down into sedimentary. Sedimentary can then be metamorphosed. And it's like the circle of life, ever changing. I have very key important terms within the definition. So as an example for igneous rocks, I have the terms intrusive, meaning that these formed inside the Earth's crust. Extrusive, being formed outside. As you can see, they're categorized here. Sedimentary rocks, I have them organized whether they be clastic, chemical, or organic based. And then lastly, metamorphic, we can look at things whether they be in particular foliated or non-foliated, and some very specific terms. So again, what I have here, these are just a sample of very common rocks that we have. Down here, using that same activity from above from the minerals, you'll be able to identify these 5 particular rocks. You will identify what they are and the family in which they belong. Well, how will this help us in the midterm? Well, this same fundamental idea that you're going to be completing in these activities, you will be using this in the midterm. You will receive a photo of a random mineral or rock, and it will have you identify what it is based off of its properties. So again, you're going to scroll up here again, you're going to click under this link. It's going to take you to a website that's interactive that teaches you how to identify the fundamentals of minerals. You'll use the tools that I have as well to help you work through this. Once you're done, don't forget to complete all 9 minerals. Scroll down to the bottom, identify your 5 basic rocks, submit your lab, and that's it for the week. Thank you very much, and hey, we'll talk soon.